All right, yeah, come on in, have a seat. We're going to go ahead and get ready for the family discussion panel. And Nick, and I always butcher your last name, Gaglia. Did I do it right?
Almost there.
I'm close. Has put together this phenomenal panel of speakers, and my heart is so touched that each and every one of you are here today. And I, could start crying right now because I know this is going to be really emotional, but very powerful and very needed. And I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming and sharing your experience and being part of this. So here's Nick. Oh, you got it.
Thank you, Jody. I want to start off by acknowledging Jody in a little more detail. Without her, this wouldn't be possible. You're a one-woman army. Yeah, Batman and Batman, two of you, no Robin. But I met Jody, was it 3 years ago? She called me up after she started SIA, and she was planning the first convention on the Queen Mary, and said, I'm aware of the work you've done in this field, and I'd love for you to come and speak. And I said, sure, absolutely. And I thought it was just going to be another speaking thing. But then when I got there, it was completely different. After the panel, there's survivors and supporters, and everyone just kind of hung out for the whole weekend, and it became what a lot of people thought was going to be somewhat traumatic and re-stimulating by talking about these stories. Actually turned out to be something incredibly therapeutic and cathartic. And then the second year, she invited me back, and I'm still not sure why, but she invited me back, and she said, this is after we did Dr. Phil, and she said, I'd love for you to bring your mother and your sister with you, because we never hear the parents' side of the story. It's easy to understand, I was a kid, I was abused, I was raped, whatever. That's an easy argument, but you never hear how the parents are deceptively marketed to, how they're manipulated, and in a lot of cases how they're abused as well. And it's an incredibly important part of the story, because it's the parents who are in charge of the kids, and they're the ones who make the decisions. In the US, if you're a human under the age of 18, you don't have the constitutional right to sign yourself out of someplace and to get yourself out of there if there's trouble. You're trapped. So it is the parents' responsibility, and I'm glad we were able to start this discussion last year at the convention, and with my mom and my sister and myself, and by the time this year came around, it was like, okay, let's take what we started last year and expand upon it, have multiple parents, multiple families, and really carve out the whole story. So Jody, I know how much time and money and everything that you put into this, and in a lot of ways it may feel thankless, but I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for giving us a platform to speak about this. And Steve, thank you for being her right-hand man. She wouldn't be able to do it without you. Got to give a big shout out to Steve. He's always there. As well as Jorge, who we all just met, and he was like, dude, whatever you need, I'm there for you. Thank you, Jorge. thank you for everyone for coming out today and supporting. And I also want to thank this panel. They traveled in from all over the nation on their own dime. No one flew them out here to do this. No one's getting paid to do this. But we're all out here for one reason, and one reason specifically, to give kids a voice who don't have one of their own. And the kids I'm referring to are kids who haven't gone through this type of abuse, who may, and perhaps we can prevent that from happening by raising awareness. I'm talking about the kids who are, being abused right now as we sit up here today in their own facilities and who are trapped. I'm talking about the kids who didn't make it out alive, unfortunately, and who were killed in their programs. I'm not just talking about suicide. Yeah, there's PTSD and there's suicide, but kids who were killed by the staff. And you're going to hear about those stories today as well. And I'm talking about the kids who are now adults, sometimes in 40s, 50s, 60s, and who are living with the PTSD and maybe don't understand what they went through, and they're in incredible amounts of pain. And so we are the voice of all these people. So thank you, everyone on the panel. This means an incredible amount to me for you all being here and sitting up here. So I guess I'll introduce myself. I'll introduce the panel, and then after I introduce the panel, I'll get a little bit more into my story, and then we'll go one by one. Everyone could say whatever you feel like, whatever makes you comfortable, and then we'll open up to a more discussion-oriented thing. And if there's someone here that wants to share a story or have a question, that'll be the time. A couple of quick announcements. After this, we're breaking for lunch, and then next we have Phil Elberg, who is an incredible speaker, coming on, followed by Sean Wilcox. And if you can stick around, it'll be amazing. And in the evening, starting at 7:30, promptly get there beforehand, we're doing the film event. So looking forward to seeing everyone later as well. Let's see. A little about myself, if you can allow me this. Would you mind holding this for me? Yeah. Does everyone know what LinkedIn is? LinkedIn, I first came in contact with LinkedIn about 6 months ago. My sound mixer said, "Hey Nick, can you endorse me on LinkedIn?" LinkedIn is a social media thing for jobs, for careers, and I didn't have an account, but I created one, so I was an honor. He's an Emmy winner. I'm like, he wants me to endorse him, so I went on there, I endorsed him, created a whole profile, and then I waited around for 6 months for someone to endorse me, not one person. I'm just. Is that what it is? But I finally got an endorsement, and I think this will help everyone understand who I am. And this is what it says. Nick is extremely creative, knowledgeable, and hardworking. He is capable of handling projects of any scope. He is wonderful as a manager, showing confidence and never hesitating when it comes to making decisions. At the same time, he always treats the other members of his team in a supportive, uplifting manner. Nick would be an asset to any project. I heartily recommend him. Love, Mom. So if there's anyone out there looking to hire a filmmaker, I have a strong referral. She'll fight for me. But on a serious note, I'm a filmmaker, I'm an activist, but I'm also a survivor of institutional abuse. I was in a place called Kids of North Jersey from 14 to 17 years old, and saw all types of experienced and saw all types of crazy abuse, which I'll get into in a little bit. I when I was 17, I got out because I escaped. And since then, when I was sitting in there, I knew no one on the outside world knew what was going on inside. And still, most people don't. And I felt a responsibility to do what I can and raise awareness. And my passion from a very early age was film. So I thought, let's get going, figure it out, and make some films on this topic. That's a little about me. I'll get a little more into me in a second. But I want to introduce the panel. First is Cynthia. Thank you for being here. She lost her daughter in one of these places. She'll get more into her story. Very, very sad story. Next is Joan, who was knew you from kids. She was a mother, and her daughter Michelle is here. And Michelle's story is very important because we rarely hear what happens from the siblings' perspective. She wasn't in the program, but the program was a cult, and everyone was involved, and everyone received abuse. And even though she wasn't in there, she was in there. I think, as far as I'm concerned, this is the first time you're really going to hear somebody talk about that side of the story. So thank you guys for being here. Next is Bob and Sally Bacon. Bob, Bob, I just realized we're really lucky up here for all these wonderful women. You and me.
Clairvoyant women.
Clairvoyant, yeah. Apparently, you can't generalize. It's taboo to generalize, except all. The one thing you can. All women believe they're clairvoyant. So, including Sally. Anyway, Bob and Sally had a son named Aaron Bacon. 20 years ago, as of March 31st, he died. I made a film on it. There's a book on it, and I won't get too much into the story because that's what they're here to do. And next is my sister, Teresa, and my Mom. Teresa was in there with me, and my mom is my mom, and happy to have you guys here. Okay, thank you all. So like I said, I'll start from the very beginning. I grew up in the Bronx, and at an early age, my parents got divorced. There was chaos in the house. And then by the time I hit 13, I did probably what most kids do. I started experimenting with pot and alcohol. That can be scary to a lot of parents, even though it's quite common. I was a troublemaker. I was cutting school. I got to the point where I was doing drugs, pot that is, on almost a daily basis. I was violent at home. I would break things all around the house. I would get into constant fights with my family, and I needed help. I needed some sort of therapy. And my father saw a commercial on TV of a place called Kids of North Jersey, which claimed to be this revolutionary drug rehabilitation clinic, and they thought that it was the perfect fit for me. So one day I thought I was going clothing shopping, something I enjoyed doing at that time. And I was a little suspicious because it was a school day. My mom was taking off of work. She's like, "Oh, we're gonna go clothing shopping." And I was like, "Okay, I guess it's my day." We're going to the outlets, and we're driving through Secaucus. I'm like, "Oh, there's Ralph Lauren." And she said, "No, we'll go there. We'll stop there afterwards." "Oh, there's Tommy Hilfiger." "Oh no, we'll stop." And we kept on going, and then there's factories and warehouses, and I'm like, okay, we must be going to some place that's extremely exclusive. And we go through, what did that sign say? It said, no trespassing. I'm like, okay, well, this is gonna be really good. We get out of the taxi, we walk inside, and it took me that long to figure it out, but we walked inside, and I was like, no, there's no clothes here. And I ran out, and this car came chasing after me with 4 or 5 guys in it. They grabbed me, threw me in the car, drove me back, and that was the beginning of my 6-hour-long intake process, which ultimately turned into a 2.5-year stay there. So I was in there for 30 days, and they had complete control over the milieu. We were in a windowless, white-walled room all day long. We weren't allowed to read. We weren't allowed to write. We weren't allowed to talk to anybody. All we were forced to do was talk about our druggy past all day long. And if they thought you were lying, which they thought everyone was lying, you would be screamed at. And if you weren't screaming at somebody else, calling them a liar, then that would happen to you. And ultimately, if you didn't want to participate, they would physically restrain you on the floor. And it was 4 or 5 guys, and I'm not talking about trained, licensed staff members. I'm talking about unlicensed staff members, other kids on your level in the program, holding you down, one on each limb, 4, 5, 6 hours at a time. One time while being restrained, I was touched inappropriately. I tried to fight the person off. I wasn't able to. And when I eventually got up from being restrained, I told one of the staff members, and I was called a liar. It's like, oh, you're lying, you're making it up. And then when the parents came to visit twice a week at the open meetings, we had to make it look like everything was perfect. And if the staff sensed that you were deviating from that in any way, you would be punished severely after the open meeting was over. And now think about this. We were kids in there, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, during our formative years when our prefrontal cortex is being developed, the boss of our brain, the decision-making part of our brain. And this is what we're being taught, that no matter how ugly or disgusting or how much pain you're in, you have to make sure everything looks like roses on the outside. And that's one of the things we take with us later on in life. Another thing that was going on is we not just weren't allowed to masturbate, they bastardize it. If we had wet dreams, they would scream out, oh, were you masturbating? And we would get in severe, severe trouble. So at a time when we're going through puberty and we're supposed to be embracing our bodies and on a psychological level adapting, we're taught that to feel shamed about what is organic. And again, that's another thing we're being taught during this very important time that carries over to later on in life. It got to the point where I personally was restrained well over 100 times. And because we really didn't have any human contact, it got to the point where I wanted to be restrained just so I could feel touch. And again, that's something else where I was taught, and we were taught on a subconscious level, that carries over to later on to adult years. And there's something called repetitive compulsion, the psychological need to reenact a traumatic experience. And it could manifest in the form of becoming the abuser or becoming the abused, the victim, over and over again. So in times of great trauma in one's adult life, I always question, well, where does one go? Where could one go when they're re-stimulated? And we could get into that later. There's been tons of research done on brainwashing, thought reform, whatever you want to call it, ideological totalism, on adults. Lifton did his research in the 50s, and it was conclusive. And he said this was one of the most severe things you could do on a human with long-lasting effects. And he was studying Westerners in communist China, adults. And I think, well, what if you did that same exact behavior to teens? Again, during their formative years, when their prefrontal cortex is being developed. How does that stick with them, and how does that manifest later on in life? For different people, I'm sure it's different things, but I've spoken to countless survivors over the years, and I've seen this type of thing manifest in different ways, and when you receive it under the guise of treatment, under the guise of help, that makes it extra difficult to navigate, because for many years you think, oh no, I was in there for help, and if it didn't work, then something, maybe it was me, I don't know. But it's almost impossible, especially when you're being told that the only place for you out of here is jail, institution, or death, and if you ever leave, ever, you will die. And that's what you're being told, and that's what you believe. And they create this atmosphere, this total purification atmosphere, this thing that's unattainable, that's unreachable, this purer than pure thing, which is actually not organic to the human condition. And that's how they capture people. You think, by going through this process, I'm going to receive this thing that's unreceivable or unattainable. And you can never get there. So you're ultimately setting yourself up for failure. And that's part of the control. My sister, Teresa, escaped a urine. She was a lot more clever than I was. I was like, I'm going to die. I should just stay in here and rot for the rest of my life. And she was like, I'm leaving. So she played the game really well, and she escaped. And they told me she was on the street doing crack. They told me she was on the street doing crack, and I could never talk to her ever again for the rest of my life. And then my father eventually, when he found her, he sided with her, and they said, you can no longer speak to your father. But I believed if I left that I would die. And then after 2.5 years, I'm sitting there with my eyes closed, and I had a vision that felt more real to me than anything I ever experienced in my entire life. I didn't know if it came from a guardian angel or if it were